ignorant of the world.
Our
And
culture.
we were both crazy enough and brave enough to take our passport and leave the country to teach English abroad.
Yeah.
Our eyes are different from the eyes of the people in our home country. Most Americans never leave home. Most Americans never see other cultures in other countries or even attempt to learn another language. I mean, your eyes have seen Ethiopia, Larry.
Yes.
You know, your heart has felt it. Your nose has smelt it.
Well, see, why is Ethiopia so, why did you mention Ethiopia?
Because you're unique, Larry. And I think it's okay to flex on them. It's cool to be an international American.
Okay.
And I think the fact that you've been to Ethiopia makes you unique, legit, and your story valid and interesting.
Well,
How many people in Crenshaw can say that they stepped foot in the land of Haile Selassie? You know, and I think you're allowed to be proud of this.
All right, man.
You know, when the great one said, love others as you love yourself.
Yes.
He didn't say hate yourself.
Yes.
You know, it's okay to love yourself. And it's okay to swag out a little bit.
Oh my goodness.
As long as we keep kindness intact, you know, and as long as you swag out, but you bring other people up at the same time.
Very well said. With that, I'm recording now. Maybe you weren't aware. But ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Joseph, one of my former colleagues from Oman, which is over in the Middle East, over in this part. All right. I had the pleasure of meeting and working with Joseph. I was in Oman for about just under 6 months. And yeah, and so Joseph is a well-traveled, internationally inclined man. He speaks at least 3 languages, at least, that I'm aware of. Okay, he's showing me 4, 4 languages, and yeah, and we've had some wild conversations over in Oman that were enlightening, and I found Joseph to be immensely knowledgeable. So he was a wonderful person to talk with in Oman. Although our schedules.
I'll interject real quick in honor of Nipsey Hussle and say that's love, man. Thank you.
That's right.
And you know, Nipsey used to say that to people. When people would come and say kind words to him, he would say that's love.
See, and this is another reason why Joseph is such an important and interesting guy, because when I was in Oman and, you know, I had that, when Nipsey passed, you know, that was a very crushing blow to, you know, my psyche. And
and me.
I was able to talk to you. I was able to talk to you about Nipsey, and it blew my mind that, you know, Nipsey's reach was so far that, you know.
Well, bro, I saw Haile Selassie in Nipsey. I saw Ethiopia in Nipsey. You know, you can see his regal face, man. He had the face of a king.
Oh my gosh.
And he was a leader. Man. You know, and he had that balance of a warrior and a lover, a peacemaker and a rebel.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he died, I mean, my daughters saw how sad I was. And I was crushed too, Larry.
Yes.
And it was also a blessing for me to be able to express myself to you and have a mirror and have someone who could understand me as a poet, as I am, you know?
Oh yeah, a poet. There you go, man. You are, for the guests, for those who are listening, you know, and watching this, you know, Joseph is, you know, he and I met at a university in Oman where we were teaching English, but beyond teaching English, you know, there's so much more, so many other facets to this man. You know, Joseph is a poet, musician, you know, a father, teacher.
And you know, Larry, and also, you know, I think that we both are millennial American young men. And even though my melanin levels are a little bit lower than yours, you know, we grew up with a lot of the same cultural influences. And it doesn't matter, you know, whatever racial differences people want to put on us, You know, we are two seekers, and we're two artists, and we're two sensitive people, and it doesn't matter. You know, and that's what, and I think that's something that we could relate on immediately. And we started talking about Ethiopia, and you told me you went to Ethiopia, and I was all ears, man, because I've been dreaming to go to Ethiopia for like 10 years. So we talked about lots of issues, man. We talked about racism. We talked about the mental illness in our society. We talked about how isolated we are and how stressed we are as Americans.
Yeah.
And why you and I both chose to travel and teach and get out. And not many people can understand that. You know, I've been outside America for 14 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like I left in 2006. When I come home to America, I've only been to America about 3 times in the past 14 years. And when I come home, I have culture shock. It's hard for me to come home.
Right.
Because I've changed so much. I mean, how many years did you spend abroad, Larry?
12 years.
Exactly, around the same, you know.
Yeah, I left March 2007, and I came home, what was that? Well, 2019, so 12.
And real quick, tell any of the friends or whoever is listening, where have you been, Larry? I want to ask you a question, man. Let's get to know the host a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Well, you know, my travels were certainly not planned. Okay, let me establish that. Okay, when I moved to South Korea in 2007, I was ambitious enough to say, you know, I'm going to do many things while I'm in Korea. I'm going to travel. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to advance in martial arts. You know, I'm going to get a higher ranking black belt. And I thought even maybe I was going to settle down and get married. I did not settle down and get married.
To a South Korean girl? You were thinking about that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Hines Ward would have loved that. I don't know if a big shout out to Hines Ward,
right.
Badass wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Shout out to Snoop Dogg too in LA. What's up? You know, I'm a Renaissance man. You know, so yeah, your kids would have been cool, man. Imagine that Larry with the South Korean girl would have been like Hines Ward and martial arts, man. He would have been a badass. But anyway, I'm sorry. You can keep on rolling.
I was pulling for the universe to give me some of that energy. You know, so I didn't get married. My martial arts rank has remained the same. My Korean has improved. Let's see. Yeah, so it's hit or miss. Oh, and traveling. I didn't travel. I was in Korea for nearly a decade. And your jaw.
Damn.
And
you didn't go to Laos? Wait, hold on. You didn't go to Laos? You didn't go to Myanmar, Cambodia?
Exactly. I did not. I went from Korea to Japan a number of times. Nice. And I went to Taiwan once, and let's see, the Philippines, I think. No.
That's a lot, Larry. You know, that's more than some people in a lifetime, man. You know?
That's true. But wait. Let's take that back. I hadn't been to the Philippines yet. So it was just Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and back to the US. Over 10 years.
Wow.
Over 10 years. Now, my colleagues, you know, I was coming into contact with people who within, 6 months were off to 2 or 3 countries on a vacation, 2 or 3 week vacation. And over 10 years, nearly 10 years, only 5 countries.
That's interesting. You're being so honest and transparent, and that's really cool because when we look online, and you know, I'm not on social media. I've really unplugged and disconnected over the past 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
So I haven't really liked the direction I've seen.
Oh yes.
Humanity going, and especially in terms of just showing off. And for me, that's really lame. And so I think it's really cool that you are saying, you know, wow, I didn't do that, because that's really honest, man. Now, what would you say is the reason why you didn't?
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I was coming from America, so I already had a number of priorities. You know, I wanted to get out of debt, student loan debt, credit card debt, and that's where my money was going. I was sending it home to pay that off. because I was trying to maintain that standard of living back at home. I always thought, you know what, what's important is I did not think that I was moving on a forward path. I didn't think I was on the right path. I always thought the right path was back in America.
Damn.
And that
I didn't. You see, I didn't. See, I wanted to escape the rat race.
Yes.
All right. So I was dancing to Bob Marley when I was 10 years old back in 1993. All right. I swear to God, I found my sister. My sister was in high school at the time. Right. Yes. And I found Bob Marley's Jammin' record.
Yes.
Right. And I used to listen to that song while playing basketball. And anyway, I grew up and I started to understand it. And I started to understand when he said, it's a disgrace to see the human race run a rat race. Oh, yeah. And that was my thinking in college, man. You know, I entered college in Auburn, Alabama, which is a strange side story for my crazy journey. You know, this Florida boy from Clearwater, Florida, the Tampa Bay area. Shout out to Tom Brady coming to Tampa. What's up? We're going to win the Super Bowl this year, you know. But anyway, so going to Auburn, Alabama for me was a very strange cultural experience. And when I was there in college, I was completely alone. I was a long-haired, hippie dude, totally rejected, felt like an outcast. Shout out to Andre. And when I was in Alabama, I was totally alone. But I didn't want any part of the normal American life. I was freaked out by it. It scared me. The mortgage, right? Like I was studying French at the time because I was dreaming to go to West Africa where French is still the most important language. And in French, mortgage means death. Yeah. You know, and I saw my middle upper class, whatever, white American society that I grew up in Tampa Bay as miserable. You know, I went to an elite high school in Tampa Bay called Berkeley Prep. You can Google it. And I went to high school with kids whose fathers owned Outback Steakhouse, kids who were super rich, and they were miserable. And I used to go visit their houses in South Tampa, where Tom Brady's house is now. He took over Derek Jeter's old house. And I used to live in that neighborhood, bro. I used to go to high school parties in South Tampa. And those houses were dead. And the families were sad. And the kids were on fucking computer screens all the time. Totally alone. I used to go into these huge houses that were dead inside. So I saw when I was a teenager that this dream of extreme wealth and extreme comfort doesn't actually produce happiness. And so I was on the journey of discovering happiness and discovering myself. So when I was in college, all I wanted to do was get out. So I never saw myself as coming back and trying to make it at home.
Oh,
you know,
that's exactly what I was thinking. I thought Korea was going to be a slingshot. I was going to get catapulted into a new realm, you know. And I even thought, because we were like 16 hours ahead, I thought, oh, Japan's stock market opens earlier than, I thought Japan's stock market influences the world. So if I know what happens in Japan, I can invest in America with a little bit of insider trading knowledge or something. It didn't work. It didn't work. 2007, 2008, subprime mortgage crisis.
Yeah.
Lost money. Like, it was terrible.
But you know, doesn't that, you know, it's interesting that before we started recording, we talked about success.
Yes.
And for me, my definition of success is so radically different from what people in my family, in my community in Tampa Bay told me was success.
Yes.
And I became kind of like that hippie renunciate in high school. You know, I just didn't want what other people wanted. I didn't care about what other people cared about.
Yeah.
I kind of started to just be on the outside. And so for me, success has never been connected to ambition and goals. And I think in America, we are sick with ambition and goals and the future.
Wow.
And yeah, and I've had to meditate on that and work on that in my subconscious for a decade, you know, to move beyond this idea that we're not good enough, and that we're not good enough unless we're famous. Right. And we're not good enough unless we're super rich or super beautiful. You know, we've been sold a lie. You know, wisdom and enlightenment lead to liberation. All right. Knowledge leads to power, yes. Not ego. You know, and we have been sold a lie growing up that success is related to all these material things or superficial things like your face or some fake titties, you know? or people dying in the South from injecting concrete in their butt. You know, what is going on, man? Like, we are so lost from the path of wisdom and knowledge.
Yes.
And we've gone to the path of ambition and goals. And we think that's success. You know, I like what Bob Dylan said. He said success is when you wake up, from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, you do what you want. You know, you do what you want. Not just do what you have to do, what you need to do, which is something that happens to us in the American way of life. You know, we feel like we gotta do this and we gotta work. And are we enjoying it? You know, are we enjoying what we do?
No, the statistics say, most people, hate their jobs,
Someone told me 90%. And I was like, is that possible? And when I think back, and I'm sure you worked since you were young too. I mean, my first job when I was 15, 16, washing cars, bus boy, bag boy, valet, I've always worked. And I was lucky enough to work with cool people. And I did learn that about the cool side of American culture. It's not the job, it's who you work with. And I worked with a lot of cool people growing up, like, those summers in Florida and working through high school and college. And, you could have a shitty job, but if you were working with cool people who you could hang out with after work, it'd be fun.
Slow down there, slow down. This is international. This is going to be,
I just said okay, it's okay symbol. That's all it is.
Oh, okay. I'm with you. I follow. Boy, oh boy.
You know what I'm saying? But back to this, our obsession with success. This leads us to be dissatisfied and to feel that we're not good enough.
Yes.
It is so hard to find people who accept themselves and love themselves.
Yes.
And we always think we got to do more and have more and be more. Like, what is this obsession with self-improvement? We should have this same obsession with self-knowledge.
Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, yes.
And we keep chasing this stuff outside ourselves instead of going within. And again, what Bob Marley said, he said, every man is a universe unto himself. We are a universe inside ourselves. And neurologists and physicists and astronomers can prove it today. When you look at how the universe is formed, it looks remarkably like the human brain.
Yeah.
And I know you and I, we both also have an interest in ancient Egypt, in ancient civilizations.
Absolutely.
I've recently watched a cool documentary that, funny enough, was recommended to me by Joe Rogan and, his podcast. Joe's okay. Joe for me is an average Joe. He's a very, very normal dude.
Yeah.
And he's curious. And I know some pretentious teachers that we work with. I mean, we work with some pretentious teachers in the world of Western teachers abroad. And some of them are a little bit arrogant and a little pretentious intellectually, right? And some of these pretentious intellectuals, they might put Joe Rogan down. But I'm like, yo, Joe Rogan is exposing mass culture to some very interesting voices and some very interesting minds. And one of them is this documentary called Magical Egypt. And what's very interesting, Larry, and I've been obsessed with this all week, it's been my obsession this week, is that the ancient Egyptian temples were all dedicated to the human brain and the human spine. And they were symbols of humans expanding their consciousness and taking their brains to another level. And this is something else that I find shocking about us as Americans and us as people in general. We don't think about our brains very much. I'm a religious water drinker. I'm a religious hydrator, right? So like Tom Brady, again, shout out to the Bucks. I drink 3 liters a day, right? And I believe hydration is one of the keys to enlightenment. It's one of the keys to happiness and health. Well, and I'm a Pisces too, right? So I'm a water sign. So water's life, And it's brain health. And they don't teach us that shit, man, They don't. How often do your teachers talk about your brain?
Yeah, 70% of the human body is water. So,
we all functioning like dried raisins, man. I used to tell my students all the time, I'm like, imagine a grape full of juice and imagine a raisin dry. Your brain on water is like a grape full of juice, and your brain without water is like a raisin dry. And, most people are functioning in a dehydrated state all day, every day. And they don't realize that it creates aggravation, frustration, and anger. Because imagine a car engine running without oil. Right. It's going to dry, it's going to grind, And that's how the human brain is without water. So I would say to anyone who's interested in happiness and freedom and enlightenment, man, water is the base, bro. you know?
Ooh, that's a lot. We've discussed a lot already. Where do we?
Yeah, I'm a stream of consciousness kind of person, you know, and
Right on, man. Jeez.
but I think that's what heart-to-heart communication is, Larry, right? You know, it's thinking less, feeling more. And also in the West and in America, we become too heady, you know, and I think it's part of a desensitization program. You know, like I was a very sensitive kid as a Pisces, and people call me, you know, say I'm oversensitive, a crybaby, blah blah blah. But sensitivity is empathy, Larry, right? Like sensitivity is what makes us feel each other. And a quick shout out to Black American culture and Black American lexicon, right? As an English teacher abroad for 13 years, I've been teaching people the expression, I feel you. And I have always told my classes in Morocco, in South America, in Asia, that this expression is an African-American expression. And it means I understand you with the heart. And that shit is deep. You know? So.
Wow, man.
And you know, you're a teacher and I'm a teacher, and we understand linguistics, you know, and we are both lovers of language. So we like to analyze language. And, you know, I mean, I think I shared something with you earlier today about Bob Marley, and you were like, what's your source?
Yeah, man.
And I was like, what a teacher, man. But it's good. But it's good because we should all ask that. We should, and you know, everyone should have an academic intellectual mind. Like, tell me your source. Where did you read that? Where did you hear that? Questioning sources is so important. And very few of us really do it.
Well, but in that sense, that was, you know, you mentioned a nuance or some nugget of truth, you know, in Bob Marley's life that I missed. But let me explain, because, you know, I wasn't always a Bob Marley fan. Only until, you know, I moved to Korea.
Okay.
Only until I moved to Korea did I start exploring. You know, I found that I had a lot of time. I was watching more YouTube videos on subject matter that I wanted to. It was, you know, intentional.
Yeah.
And when the Bob Marley documentary was released, I watched that. But, you know, there were other details that I zoomed in on. And again, it's also been a long time since I watched that documentary. So when you told me that, I thought, okay, that sounds about right. But also, you know, lead me to the water, you know?
That's cool. That's cool. But, and you know, this subject, again, I think relates to you and I being what I call bridge beings.
All right.
All right. So Bob Marley was a bridge being.
Okay.
And, you know, and as I told you, you know, his father was, I hate these words because, again, I'm an anthropologist and an archaeologist, so I don't believe in races, you know. There's a human race with different melanin levels, right? But they put these labels on us, okay? And I want all of us to go beyond these labels. And it's really important that mentally we go beyond this.
Yes.
And we stop saying, oh yeah, my black friend, my white friend, oh, he's cool for a white boy. Oh yeah, what is this shit? You know, but Bob Marley suffered that, right? They called it half caste in Jamaica, which means, you know, a mixed kid. And he suffered a lot. And he suffered a lot. And you know, what's interesting is I find interesting correlations between Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, and Drake, actually. Because Drake, too, was rejected by his white Jewish community in Toronto. Girls wouldn't date him. They even have a Yiddish word for the N-word. And they used to call him the N-word in high school. Wow. All right? But then when Drake would go to Tennessee, he would get bullied by his black family, you know? And he has this great speech when he accepted some award where he's talking about getting bullied in Tennessee by his black family, and he's walking home all alone. And he said, this award is for all the kids who feel like outcasts, who feel ostracized, who feel rejected, you know? And Drake was rejected and bullied by his white Jewish community in Canada. He was bullied and rejected a lot by also his black community in America. And Bob Marley experienced the same thing. You know, he was rejected by his uncles, called the German boy, because he was half white, forced to grow his own corn, right? Wow. Beaten up. Yeah, man. You know, and for me, I identify with this because, check this out. So in 1996, I was 13 years old. My heroes were Deion Sanders, as a Florida boy, right? Deion Sanders was the man. I used to dress like him as a baseball player. I used to wear my hat to the side. I used to walk to baseball practice with a silver chain. I saw the movie Friday, again, shout out to LA, on VHS in 1995 or 96, whatever that was. And I wanted to be Smokey. And I went to the mall and I bought a silver chain, you know? So, and I'll say one more thing. I've always wanted to say this, you know, imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yes.
All right. When someone like Mac Miller gets all tattooed up and he loves Black culture and he loves Black music, like, no one should hate him for that. And no one should make fun of him for that. Like, he is imitating something that he admires and he loves. And at the same time, I was in 8th grade when I watched Allen Iverson play for Georgetown in the NCAA tournament. And I have never seen a little human being with more fight in all my life. And I was a tiny dude. I entered high school at 5 feet tall and 90 pounds, like Julian Edelman. Shout out again to Tom Brady, okay? I was a little underdog, a little fucking Mighty Mouse. And I loved Allen Iverson, you know? And I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful when little white dudes, and you know what? Jay-Z touched on this in an Oprah interview. He said, if you're a little white dude and you grow up idolizing Snoop Dogg and your father's a racist and your father says something to you racist, you're gonna say, well, man, I love Snoop Dogg, so I'm not gonna listen to you. And that's my story. You know, I mean, I did hear racist things growing up in Florida and Alabama a little bit, but my heroes were Allen Iverson and Snoop Dogg and Bob Marley and Jimi Hendrix. So it's like, you could never influence me because I idolize these people. And you know, and when the song White Iverson came out, I mean, I remember I was in tears. But anyway, man, and again, that's me and you, Larry. We're bridge beings. Like, both of us are going beyond borders. We're going beyond these national identities. We're going beyond these racial fucking terms that they put on us. We're human beings.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And cosmic beings at the same time. Like, Jimi Hendrix did not like being called Black. Jimi Hendrix did not like being called American. Jimi Hendrix said, I'm a cosmic being. And that's where our awareness and our identification needs to be. And I have a poem called...
What's your source? What's your source? What's your source? I need to know. Like, tell me which documentary can I go to watch to hear him say that, or where you getting this information, man?
I have been, okay, check this out. All right, so this is interesting, Larry. I am totally obsessed with learning.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you.
All right, so when I was in college, those 4 years in Alabama, I was drunk one time on my 21st birthday on tequila.
Wow.
You know, I spent 4 years meditating, reading. I used to check out documentaries from because this was before YouTube, dog. YouTube was 2005. I was in college 2002, 2006. So I used to go to the library and check out documentaries. Like, for example, I'll give you a source. PBS documentary about jazz, the Ken Burns special on jazz.
Yes.
The 12 tape documentary about jazz. Mm-hmm. It will take you through a history of America and the world and our music and our story, and it's absolutely amazing. But back to Jimi Hendrix, I mean, I've watched every interview you can find. I've watched every documentary you can find.
Okay.
You know, I have been a hero worshiper, all right, since I was, for real. Like, I love my heroes, man. Yeah. And, you know, we both know this as Americans. If you want to be the best, learn from the best.
Okay. So
I've been someone who's been reading autobiographies and just taking anything I can from my heroes.
Right. No, that's absolutely right. I heard Warren Buffett say, you know, or maybe it wasn't Warren Buffett. Someone said, you know, read autobiographies, you know, read about people's lives, you know, really get into it, especially your heroes, you know, find out what made them tick, follow their stories, you know.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'd highly recommend the autobiography of Miles Davis. He wrote it. Amazing book. Take you from the 1950s to the 1990s in the United States.
That's a book
I highly recommend. But I'm also
referencing that.
But I'm also yeah. Sorry, what?
I haven't heard anyone reference the autobiography of Miles Davis. Malcolm X, yes, but Miles Davis, no.
I've read the Miles Davis autobiography twice. I've read the Malcolm X biography twice. And again, you know what? I just watched the documentary or started it about who killed Malcolm X. And I'd like to say something about him quickly, all right? One thing that people really, because, you know, when I mention to any, whatever, light-skinned, melanin, low melanin level white people, whatever you want to call it, when I mention Malcolm X, they jump on the fact that he was racist and hateful. And I'm like, have you read his autobiography? Have you read it? And they say no. And I say, please don't speak.
Right.
Because there is a quote in the latter third of his book, right, where he's been rejected by the Nation of Islam. He's all alone, and there's a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, you know, I don't care if you're a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian or white or atheist. I don't care what you are. If you want to help me fix this messed up world, I'm with you. And when Malcolm X was rejected by the Nation of Islam and he was alone, he was talking with Buddhists, and he was talking with open-minded beatnik hippie people like me. You
Right.
know, he was really expanding his circle because he wanted to make the world better. And he was not a hateful person. He was a passionate person. And I think that his passion came for his love of people. But again, they want to demonize, you know, and when I mention Jimi Hendrix, everyone says, oh, heroin overdose. Wrong. When you mention Bob Marley, oh, he had cancer from smoking weed. Wrong. You know, they demonize these people, Larry, because they don't want us to know that these people were loving and compassionate. They don't want any of us to be loving and compassionate.
It was Malcolm X's travels that brought in his mind when he, you know, went to Saudi Arabia and, you know, went to Mecca alongside, you know, brothers, sisters, you know, of a fairer complexion.
Yeah.
That he had been taught, or he had learned to, yes, demonize, you know, but he was able to empathize with these people and see their humanity, and then he was able to put the humanity forth or first. You know?
Another Malcolm X quote, and I'm a person who lives by quotes, right? And I remember in college falling in love with quotes and thinking to myself, man, why haven't more people shared quotes with me growing up? Like, why haven't more of my mentors and uncles and older people in my life, why weren't they lovers of quotes? Because, you know, quotes, a quote can change your day, it can change your life. Simple words can change someone's life, right? Change your perspective. You know, I've heard wise men say enlightenment is just a question of perspective. It's just a question of point of view. It's just a question of changing how you see things. That's when you start to have epiphanies and realizations and you start to move on. And let me go back to Malcolm X and his quote to live by, because I know sometimes I zigzag and I go on tangents, but I want to come back. You know, one of my favorite quotes of Malcolm X, he says, be patient with people who don't know what you know, because at one point you did not know what you know now.
Oh, yes.
You know, and we have to be patient with ignorance, and we have to be compassionate with people who don't know, or people who have been programmed or brainwashed with things that are false. You know, one of my favorite philosophers says the only thing more dangerous than ignorance is false knowledge, right? And a lot of us are sick with ignorance, but a lot of us are sick with false knowledge. And false knowledge is just brainwashing. You know, it's brainwashing and conditioning. And it takes a lot of time for us to decondition ourselves.
If we even get there, if we can even.
Exactly. Most people will never realize that they're conditioned. They'll never realize that they were programmed growing up.
All right, Joseph. So I want to, you know, when I was back there in Oman, we were talking about Pumas. We were talking about Nipsey, and but you had some interesting information that I was unaware of, and you brought it up, the Dionysus. Horus too?
Yeah.
So how does that relate to the Puma? Because
actually, you were the one who mentioned it to me first.
Okay.
But see, I've always had I was born on the same birthday as Dionysus. All right. So March 16th, they still celebrate his birth. I forgot the name of the exact villages in Greece, but they still celebrate it today. And he represents.
Who is Dionysus?
Dionysus he's considered the Greek god of celebration, ecstasy, dance, joy, and humor. But he's also considered the god of altered states. So they call him the god of wine. They say he taught mankind how to grow wine.
Okay.
But I've also been to his largest temple. So the largest temple of Dionysus is in Lebanon. And I went to Lebanon last June. I had a little bit of cabin fever being in Oman. Oman's real chill, but it's also not quite, it's not raw and it's not wild like Morocco or South America. Some other, you know, I spent my first 9 years in the third world. I spent my first 2 years teaching in South America, Peru and Ecuador, donde estuve aprendiendo español. Y ahora yo puedo hablar español muy bien contigo gracias a mis amigos latinos en América Latina.
Exactly.
Okay? Ahora en inglés. Okay. So first 2 years, South America, raw, wild, free. You know, it's funny, like Americans like to say, we're the freest country in the world. You know, and I remember I came home from South America, my first break, and I was with my two brothers, and I have two brothers who are, and I'm the black sheep of my family. I have two brothers who are fraternity boys, polo shirt wearing, short wearing, good old boys from the South, right? Trump voters and George Bush supporters. And I was like totally on the outside, but that's for another story. But part of the complexity of my story is just being this total black sheep growing up and just very different from my surroundings. But I forgot what I was going to say.
Wait a minute. Let me stop you there since you forgot your train of thought.
But South America.
Yeah, no. I understand why we can relate more, because you know there are spiritual locations on the planet, and when you travel to those places and when you connect with that energy there, or just while you're there and you have an experience, when you just see those parts of the world. You mentioned Peru. I imagine you went to Machu Picchu.
I did. My first year of teaching was in Peru, man.
Okay, so I've been to Peru, I've been to Machu Picchu, and by the time we met, those experiences for me, I had them. So
wow.
we could relate on, you know, the Spanish.
Nice. That's deep. That's deep. And you're the only other teacher, you know, like I have never met an ESL teacher who taught in Peru. Because most ESL teachers do what you did, right? They go to South Korea because, you know, they make some money, pay off their loans, right? Get out of debt. I went to South America for $400 a month.
Right.
So I went to South America with the intention to learn Spanish and to honor the Latino immigrants in the United States. My original intention was to learn Spanish.
Yes.
Entonces yo podría ayudar a los inmigrantes en mi país, porque yo tengo mucho respeto por los mexicanos en Florida. Okay, so I have a lot of respect for Latinos growing up in Florida. My favorite food is Mexican food. My first love was a Mexican Chicana in Florida. My second love was a Cuban girl. All right, so I loved Latinos, man, right? And so I said, okay, before I go to Morocco or before I go to the Middle East or before I go to Asia, I need to know more about our part of the world, the Western Hemisphere, the Americas. Wow. And I needed to learn Spanish out of respect for them. Because don't forget, dog, in the Western Hemisphere, Spanish is still king. English is still the second fiddle to Spanish, right?
Yes.
And you and I both know, I mean, you're from LA, I'm from Tampa, right? So we both grew up in places with lots of Latinos and were exposed to the culture. You know, you've seen their culture of positivity in warmth, in family, in food, in music, in dancing, right? You've seen it, I've seen it. And I'm sure you saw when you were in Peru. Music is everywhere, on the buses, in the restaurants. Like, music is part of their life, and joy is part of their life. You could see that. I mean, I remember like dancing on dirt floors in people's houses, and they'd be playing cumbia, drinking chelas, beers, and just everybody dancing, having so much fun. And I was like, man, back in America, especially in white America, like dancing and music is not a part of our, I'm not trying to generalize or stereotype, but it's not normally part of our life. Mm-hmm. You know? And like when I went to South America, I couldn't move at all. I had the stiff hips of a gringo, you know? I couldn't feel anything. And Latinos were always, these Peruvians were like, vamos a tomar, vamos a bailar. They're like, let's go drink, let's go dance. And I was like, okay, let's go. And I slowly started to learn to move a little bit. And, you know, I can't tell you enough that Latinos saved my life, Larry. Yeah. When I moved to South America, I was shy and I was scared and I was sad. Yeah. I was in a shell. You know, I'd been hurt a lot by people. So I had lost trust in people, right? And in South America, they were so cariño, so warm. Yeah. And they embraced me, man, for real. And like, I mean, they changed my life. They saved my life. That warmth, that openness.
My experience, my first experience in Peru changed me as well. I was coming from Korea, and you know, the Korean culture is very distant. You know, it's not, you know, forget the coronavirus thing. Usually when you meet someone, you bow and you do not shake hands or hug.
Very formal, right?
So when I went to Peru and they welcomed me with un abrazo y dos besos, so I was like, I can dig it.
It's human. It's human, man. Like, you know, and I really would encourage more of our people. Take that powerful blue passport you got. Take a few $100s. Don't go to the club. Stop spending money on alcohol for a month and buy a flight to South America. Go see for yourself. And, you know, and people always like, oh, it's dangerous. Oh, my God, Joe. I didn't have one issue, man. 2 years, a year in Peru and a year in Ecuador, and a short little journey to Colombia. I didn't have one issue. Oh, and Bolivia. I went to Lake Titicaca, so the border of Bolivia. Bro, I didn't have one issue, man. Even in Peru, I would go to the market and buy my vegetables. Bro, they didn't cheat me. You know, and you think that, oh, this is this gringo, this blanco con dinero. They think this white boy with money. No, they didn't cheat me, dude. They opened my heart, man. And, you know, I'd recommend more North Americans, yo, go south, man. You know, and so many of our typical American travelers, backpackers, I'm going to go to London, Paris, and Rome. I'm like, great, good job, just like everybody else.
Oh, man.
You know, and so I wanted to do something different, man. And so I went to South America to teach and learn Spanish and just really pay my respect to what are Latinos now? Almost 20% of our country. You know, I mean, they are
okay.
It's getting up there, you know. So
in California, they're the majority right now. So it's
insane. It's so interesting.
Throughout the nation, what by 2042, 2050, the majority will be non-white. Already in California, the majority is
mix it up, baby. I don't know if you're a Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, but one of my favorite lyrics from Anthony Kiedis, and by the way, some LA boys too. You know, and that's a great autobiography. I'll plug that real quick. It's called Scar Tissue. Shout out to all the boys with tattoos. You know, and Scar Tissue is about Anthony Kiedis, the singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who started as a rapper and later became a singer, right? And Anthony Kiedis to me and I grew up on him. You know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, I was listening to it, I was 10 years old back in 1993, again, thanks to my high school sister. And so, but Anthony Kiedis said, let's mix it up until there is no pedigree, until there is no pure blood.
Oh, wow.
And I love this theory. And also, as an anthropologist, I learned in Introduction to Anthropology that hybrid humans are the healthiest.
Yeah.
The more diverse your DNA is, the stronger your immune system, the healthier you are, and the quicker your brain will function. You know, hybrid humans are healthier. We got to keep mixing it up, man. You know, it's funny. I have an Airbnb here, right? And I've had some German guests. And I made the mistake of making one joke one time, okay? So I don't know if you watched the American, I could be a little crazy, but I don't know if you ever watched the US soccer team. We had 5, half African-American, half German players, all right? African-American fathers who were military stationed in Germany, and, you know, they dropped their seed in Germany. You know, it's all good. So some of their sons became amazing football players, you know, like Brooks, Fabian Johnson. There's a number of them, okay? And I used to tell my German guests, these guys are Hitler's worst nightmare. An African-American man breeding with an Aryan woman. And I just want to say that Hitler's theories of pure blood is the most unscientific and idiotic theory ever put forth in terms of DNA and genes. Mutts are the best. Pure bloods get sick. Just think about, you know, you lived in the Middle East, bro, so you know, like they have a high rate of cousin marriage in the Middle East. All right? And cousin marriage is producing a lot of issues in places like Qatar and Kuwait and Oman. A lot of kids with birth defects. On the other end of the spectrum, look at Brazil. Look at how mixed people are. Mm-hmm. It's all advantageous. There is not one disadvantage to genetic mixture. It's all advantageous. And one thing I'd like to say, even though I love Nina Simone, I wish she had learned this. But I'll forgive her for her ignorance on DNA and genes. You know, she was very much against the mixing of the races, whatever this is, you know?
Really?
And I wish Nina Simone, but I understand her. She was traumatized and she was brutalized. So I understand why she had some of that anger, you know? But we gotta move on from these things, man.
Mis primos son afro-alemanes. Por lo tanto, tus ideas son, what is it? Tienen un gran efecto en mi corazón.
Muy bien. You know, but that's again, and again, that's the path of knowledge, all right? So Bob Marley taught me very early through one of his lyrics, wisdom and knowledge are better than silver and gold.
Yes.
You know, and I'm on the path of gnosis, right? Gnosis, or the Gnostics, which means sacred knowledge can liberate you. Knowledge can set you free.
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you, by the way, you know what the intention or the source of this inspiration for me wanting to become a cultured and self-educated person was because during the Iraq War 2002, the rest of the world was calling Americans ignorant. The rest of the world, they were making fun of us. They were saying Americans only speak one language. Americans don't know about the world. Americans are ignorant. Americans are clueless. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I wanted to be objective, right? I want to be an objective human being. I was like, damn, they're right. And I wanted to cure myself of my own ignorance. And I was ashamed of being ignorant. And I think we should all have that shame. And we should all, you know, I mean, Confucius, and you've been to China, right? So Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, said, true knowledge begins with understanding your own ignorance. You know, admitting that you don't know is the beginning of wanting to know. And as I tell my students all the time, it's okay if you don't know, but it's not okay if you don't want to know.
Oh yeah, right. My goodness. Yeah, man.
But I don't know, man. I mean, how many of these like mass influencers in our culture are pushing that belief in knowledge and that passion for knowledge and that love of learning? It's not a central theme, and I wish it was.
Deepak Chopra?
Well, Frederick Douglass, by the way, who you look a lot like, by the way. I wanted to tell you that. It's funny, I recently watched something on him, and I wanted to mention, like, your facial features. I was like, I thought about you when I watched it. I was like, man, Larry looks a lot like him, man.
Absolutely, man. If I take this hat off and you see my hair, yeah.
Well, he's a hero of mine, man. I mean, I have not read his autobiography yet. I don't know if you have.
Yes, the narrative of Frederick Douglass, I have, yes.
Nice. I forgot who recommended it recently, but I heard someone recommend it. Like someone asked, maybe it was
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle, thank you, exactly. Who, by the way, to me is the divine comedian. Real quick, I'd like to say, you know, I don't know if you study Native American culture at all, right? So I'm also a big fan of Native American spirituality, Native American culture.
Yes.
You know, and one of my rapper names is the Underdog God, or the God of the Underdog. You know, besides African Americans and Latino Americans, who's the biggest underdog in our country? It's still the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Okay. And they continue to suffer in the worst poverty in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, we have Native Americans who have the same life expectancy as people in Haiti, who die before the age of 50 on average. Their suicide rate is 6 times the national average.
Yes, I've heard.
You know, and this is a tragedy. And it's something I've always said, and I'll say it proudly. It's the ultimate hypocrisy of our democracy. That we are the richest nation in the world. We say we're the best nation in the world. And 500 years later, they still suffer in abject poverty and misery.
Well,
and
this whole coronavirus and the way that the administration has been, dealing with, shutting down the pandemic department or pandemic bureau, and just being ill prepared for this pandemic, really shows for the vast majority of Americans that we aren't this exceptional nation. We aren't.
And that's what traveling does for you. And that's what traveling does for you. And that's why, I don't know if this is a source real quick, in PR, only 20% of Americans have a passport. Think about that. We have one of the most powerful passports in the world, and only 20% of us even bother to get one. And now I'll go back to that story about my brother, my Trump brothers, and my George Bush frat boy brothers, okay? And me being the black sheep, me being the weirdo. All right, so I came back from South America for a little break. I had to get a visa stamp for Ecuador. And I was with my brothers and my dad, and they were talking about how America is the freest country in the world. And I asked my brother, his name's Patrick, I said, and how many countries have you been to, Patrick? He's no, shut up, Joe, it doesn't matter. I'm like, it does matter. Wow. Because your experience is not valid for you to say that. Wow. And I had just come back from partying that night with my cousins. So I went out with my cousins to some bars in St. Petersburg, Florida. So Tampa Bay is a triangle, right? We got Tampa, Clearwater, St. Pete. That's the triangle, right? And I was in St. Petersburg with my cousins and stuff. And they closed the bar at like midnight or 1. And there was a police patrol in the streets. And they were like, go home, everybody go home. And I was like, what? I was like, ¿qué mierda es eso? You know? and I started telling my cousins, I was like, in Peru, we dance all night. In Peru, yes. And this is important, Larry, the right to party. Yeah. Shout out to the Beastie Boys. You got to fight for your right to party, you know what I mean? I grew up on that. All right? I grew up on the Beastie Boys. You know? I grew up on Anthony Kiedis. I grew up on these white boy rappers. So please, nobody hate me because I lack melanin. It's not my fault, you know? I didn't choose my parents in this life. But, you know, in South America, you can dance all night. In North America, we can dance all night, or we got fucking police patrols telling us to go home. That's not freedom. That is not freedom, man. And, okay, I'll give you another example. You were in Oman. This is one of my favorite examples, and I'm so happy it came up to my mind. Loitering. The law of loitering, okay? Loitering is the most insane North American law I've ever heard of, okay? Loitering means doing nothing, standing around someplace in public space, all right? In Morocco, everybody would be arrested. People in Morocco, you'll see people standing on a corner, just meditating, breathing, living in the moment. Moroccans have, and Omanis too, this is something I learned a lot from Arabs, man, is they have a different concept of time. They live in the moment naturally, historically, traditionally. You know, and my wife is Moroccan. She is not a person who thinks ahead. They enjoy the little things in the moment. And you'll see Moroccans everywhere just loitering, okay? Yeah. I came back to America, and I imagined what would it be like if I saw Moroccans loitering in the streets of Clearwater. People would look at them and say, oh my God, he's crazy. What is he doing? He's up to something. And you can be arrested for that. That is not free, bro. And you can only understand that if you leave America. Loitering is I'm going to try to watch my Irish tongue, okay? It's a messed up American law. Loitering, it is my right to stand on a corner and meditate if I want to.
Well, I can't quote, you know, the slave laws, but I'm pretty sure that they had, you know, loitering laws have everything to do with, you know, maybe the fugitive slave laws and you know, arresting, you know, black men, you know, and bringing them back to the plantations. But that's deep, Larry.
That is so deep, and I'm definitely going to Google it later, and I'm definitely going to read about that later, because I hate loitering laws. And, you know, how few of us talk about it? How few of us discuss it? How few of us think about it? Only the ones who go abroad. You know, if you go abroad, your mind becomes more broad.
Well, yeah, because if you're here, you're trapped you're trapped in that rat race. You're trapped in, you know, am I keeping up with others, keeping up with the Joneses, and, you know.
Yeah, it's a monoculture, you know, and, you know, I'll say something, like sometimes I've heard in the hip hop culture, they start saying the culture, culture. And I'm a linguist and an English teacher. The is a definitive. It means one, like the moon or the sun. The culture. No offense, hip hop culture, and I grew up on hip hop culture. Yeah. Okay, calling it the culture is extremely American, and it's extremely arrogant. You and I both know Ethiopia has like over 100 languages. Nigeria has over 100 languages. You know how many unique and diverse and beautiful cultures are just within Nigeria or just within Ethiopia? Americans saying the culture to me is a very American thing to say.
All right.
Because it's just so narrow, man. You know? And back to loitering. I forgot to throw one thing out. So in my last 13 years of teaching, I did spend 1 year sandwiched in 2015 in New York City. I was an adjunct professor at 3 universities in New York City. Lehman College in the Bronx, Mercy College in Westchester County, where like Beyonce has a house and Hillary Clinton has a house. Most expensive county in the country. Weird place, by the way. Weird place. And I also taught at Pace University down near like Wall Street. And I was an adjunct professor teaching over 40 contact hours a week, 16, 18-hour days, leaving at 6 a.m., coming home at 10 p.m., working like a dog. And that was just to support my Moroccan wife, who had a Fulbright scholarship to teach Arabic at Mercy College. So I came to New York for 1 year in my 14 years abroad to support my Moroccan wife as she was an Arabic professor at Mercy College in New York. That year in New York was so life-changing for me. To come back to America after 12 years abroad and to be thrown into the capital of the world, as Bob Dylan called it. Or just such a city of ambition and a city of suffering. You know, New York City had a very heavy vibe to me. You know, when I used to take, I think it was called the 4 train, the L train. We'll go through the Bronx, right? I mean, the Bronx, I lived in the Bronx for my first 2 months. The Bronx and Harlem are the 2 poorest counties in the United States. And they are next to Manhattan and Westchester County, the 2 richest counties in the United States. And to see that wealth disparity was really depressing to me. And the Bronx is also extremely obese. I mean, you're from LA, so I'm sure there's lots of similarities between, you know, New York City and Los Angeles and some of the levels of poverty and obesity. And
it's unbelievable how, you know, the homeless problem is so apparent these days. It was confined to Skid Row. You know, all of my life I've known of Skid Row and avoided it. But these days you can't avoid the homeless problem because it's so, you know, apparent everywhere that you go. I was watching a video of Venice Beach. I posted this on Facebook, and as you're watching, you know, a tourist or, you know, videotaping, you know, folks out and about, you can literally see on the boardwalk there, you know, tent after tent after tent, homeless person just, you know, splayed on the ground sleeping, and that has become, that's the new norm. You just see these people everywhere. Freeway underpasses. It's sad.
Larry, thank you so much for your heart, bro, and for caring and for feeling. And it's not right. And we have a lot of homelessness too in Tampa Bay because it's warm, it's hot. So people from the north, they flood down south because they can be homeless in Tampa Bay quite easily.
Right.
Now, this is interesting because we can connect this to Oman, and we can again expand on this from a cross-cultural perspective, to see this from an outsider's point of view, an international American's point of view, the traveler's point of view.
Yes.
In Oman, where we both lived, and where I've lived for the past 3 years, every Omani citizen at the age of 25, whether it's a man or a woman, is given 600 meters of land for free, tax-free for life, where they can build their villa, where they can build their family home. Every single Omani citizen is given free land for life, tax-free for life, where they can build their family home. Guess what? If you're not a slave to the landlord, if you're not indebted for rent, if your salary is not going to 30 to 50% just to cover your rent, you can actually live. Americans are rent burdened, as they say in New York. And I experienced it, man. I paid $1,600 for a box.
80% of the population in Los Angeles, you know, is renting. Folks are renting.
We have free land. Why can't we have free land? That's what Oman taught me. And I learned that my first couple months, that every Omani is given free land. And I said, Americans need to know this. I got to teach this to my people. We got to know. This ain't right. How much federal land they got, bro? They got enough federal land for all of us. There is no reason that we are landless. And I'll quote Sudan, the land of Nubia. A man without land is like a man without culture. Yeah. And I think that source was The Lost Boys. I watched a documentary about Sudanese refugees in the United States. So I'll quote that source. I remember where that quote came from. A man without land is like a man without culture.
Yeah.
There's no reason that, and even check this out, property taxes. My mom, my sweet retired mom, my Buddhist, yogi, Taoist, non-religious mom, vegetarian mom, sweet peacemaker, the pacifist, right? Who taught me to love poetry and love peace and speak for the oppressed underdogs of the world. Shout out to my mom, my grandmother, and all the Irish underdogs who actually understand what it is to be oppressed and persecuted. Just so you know, Irish people were known as the blacks of Europe for centuries, Larry. And just so you know, the Irish were slaves for 400 years in Ireland. So Irish Americans like myself, who are not racist, a big middle finger to all the Boston racists up there who don't know what it really is to be Irish and Celtic, because Boston is a mecca of racism. And I'd like to also throw this out there as an Irish American. You know, any Irish American who's racist is a shame. Is a shame to their name.
Wow.
Well, my Irish ancestors taught me different. My grandmother, Aileen McDermott, who was a famine survivor, who watched 2 of her siblings freeze to death in Montana, my Irish grandmother taught me right. And she taught me to identify with oppressed people and to identify with African Americans and Latinos and anyone who's oppressed. And my grandmother had a painting in our house called The Potato Farmers. And it shows these emaciated, starving Irish people picking out potatoes. Yeah, bro. You know, anyway, this is where I come from, you know? And that's another thing about influences, right? Like, and it connects to Jay-Z and how he said racism starts at home. Well, kindness also grows at home too.
Yeah.
You know, and if you hear your parents and your grandparents talking to you about kindness and compassion and being a fighter for justice and a voice against persecution, that will resonate with young children if we hear it.
Man, Joseph, this is a intense and wonderful opportunity to have had you, you know, share truth. You know,
but it's not right that all these people are homeless in LA, man. And you know, if you go to my SoundCloud page, I have some raw raps on there. My name is Eros Da Vinci, and one of my raps talks about how homeless kids know the blues.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've rapped about that. And even my first open mics that I did as a slam poet, shout out to Saul Williams, one of my heroes.
Yeah.
Okay. I got on stage in New York when I was a professor in New York. I used to go every Wednesday night to open mic at the New Yorican Cafe where slam poetry was born. And I used to get on stage and I used to let myself rage and let all this passion out of the cage. You know, and I did it. And I would come there after working all day and I'd get in line to make sure I could sign up and I'd get on stage and I'd scream out my heart. It's what poets are supposed to do, man. And don't forget, rappers should be poets.
Right on.
You know, and by the way, Jimi Hendrix produced a band called The Last Poets. And these were black beatnik badasses in New York who were, you know, the real rappers, the original rappers. You know, rappers should be rebellious, man.
Did you say
rappers are not supposed to toe the line?
Did you
rappers
say
are supposed to be voices of opposition?
You said Hendrix produced The Last Poet?
Yep. Yes, he did. Google it, man. I know everything about Hendrix, man. I got Jimi Hendrix tattooed on my arm. Don't ever doubt this shit, son.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow, man. See, you're just, you know, a wealth of knowledge. As I said, you know, when we started this, and we're gonna wrap this one up. But I'm gonna say, you know, I'm glad I was able to stay awake. You know, what Eric Thomas said. You know, when you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, or as you know, as you need to breathe. If your need to be successful, you know, matches your need to breathe, then you can be successful. So, you know, I mentioned this when we started. Instead of going to sleep, I stayed awake. It's over here. It's 1:44 in the morning here. And Joseph, you're in Oman. It's 11 hours ahead. But, you know, I sat here and we got this done. We met.
You know, and you know, Larry, you know, I'm not big on success, right? I'm not big on success, but I am big on honest expression. You know, and Bruce Lee said, honest expression is one of the hardest things. And for me, you know, I love the art of conversation. And I think that's something else we're losing in North America. You know, we're so distant. and even eye contact. You know, I've been in the Middle East for 9 years, almost 10, South America for a couple of years. Bro, eye contact, openness, conversation. You know, Arabs still find entertainment in conversation. They find entertainment in each other.
That's powerful.
And, you know, and in America, we find so much entertainment just with screens.
Yes.
You know, and conversation is a magical art where time can disappear, but it's honest expression. And one more thing I'll throw out real quick, connected to Bruce Lee and Jimi Hendrix. Did you know they were born on the exact same day, 1 year apart? November 27th.
I have to Google that too.
They were born on the exact same day, and they went to the same high school, Larry. They're both buried in Seattle. They're both from Seattle.
Wow.
They're born on the exact same day, and they both died under mysterious circumstances revolving around a woman and sleeping pills, both of them. Now, you think about these two men, Jimi Hendrix and Bruce Lee.
Yes.
How many people have you seen who are more powerful than these men? That's why they had to take them out, bro. You know, look, they want us weak and ignorant. They don't want us strong and knowledgeable. So any human who rises to that level of consciousness, who rises to that level of spirit, they become dangerous.
Look at Kobe Bryant.
But we all got, and you know, Bruce Lee, what's interesting about Bruce Lee, right, is again, he was a philosopher, and he was a voice of Chinese wisdom in the English language. Right. He could teach us about Taoism and Buddhism and Confucianism and Kung Fu, and he could do it in the English language. And I just like to say before I go, man, I mean, I've taken a lot of wisdom from the East. You know, I love Zen. I love Taoism. I love Kung Fu thought. I love yogic thought. Again, you know, take the good, leave the bad, think for yourself, right? Any path you study, and, you know, I'm a universal person. One of my first, you know, rapper names was Joseph Fusion with a Z, because I believe in fusion, man, right? Fusing paths, fusing religions, fusing sources of knowledge, you know, and take what's true and leave what's illusory, and try to use a discerning mind and an objective mind to reject what's not true and accept what is. And I think, as you know, we're very lucky, Larry. We are truly from one of the first international generations in human history. You know, 100 years ago, it would be very hard for our ancestors in the United States to ever know anything about Zen or yoga or Ethiopian culture. You know, being part of this international age of information and globalization, and on the good side, you know, I was an 18-year-old kid in Florida studying yoga. You know, we have access to all these paths and all these sources of knowledge and wisdom. And some of us choose to seek, and some of us choose to sit.
All right, with that said, man, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and input, bro.
No, just craziness, bro. No wisdom, man. You know, Jimi Hendrix said, try.
Just lost the connection. Joseph, you still there? Oh, man. Lost the connection with that one.